Well, hello there all my friends on the interwebs. This is Doc Eon, coming to you with another review of a role-playing game. This time, I'm going to review the RuneQuest starter set. This is for the newest edition of RuneQuest, called RuneQuest Glorantha, from the Chaosium. Now, as an introduction, I thought I'd talk a little bit about the history of this game and my own history with it. Now, the RuneQuest is originally a game from the late 70s. The first edition I haven't played. I think very few people have, because it was replaced within a year, I think, of its publication with the second edition, which was simply a slightly updated and eroded version of first. Now, let me show you. Here's my ancient copy of the second edition. It's a box set that's kind of coming apart. I've taped it some corners. I should probably tape this corner as well, and that one. It's seen a lot of use, seen a lot of play, but I've played even more actually of the third edition, which, if you're very sharp-eyed, can see says Avalon Hill, not Chaosium. This was an edition that, well, for what apparently seemed like good reasons at the time, was written by the staff at Chaosium, but published by Avalon Hill. This was a troubled time for the game, but still, this was the version that I and my friends at the time played the heck out of. We played a ton of this. When it sort of died, the license for the RuneQuest name passed to the company Mongoose Publishing. Now, Mongoose published two versions of this. This is the first edition, first Mongoose edition, simply called RuneQuest, and this is the second Mongoose edition, called RuneQuest 2. So you could call these the fourth and fifth editions. Now, the funny thing about this is that when they did the switchover, the rules were changed drastically between the first and second editions, and it was a whole new design team. I'm not sure, I'm not really informed about the history of what went on in those days. But anyway, Mongoose lost the license as well. They have a D100 basic role-playing game called Legend that they still publish, which is essentially this game with all the Glorantha and the runes stripped out of it. So it's just a generic fantasy game. The license then passed to a new small company, which was started by the main designers on this edition, and they published this, which is called RuneQuest 6th edition. This is the slipcase version, which I think only those of us who backed the original Kickstarter have. And I've played this a bunch. I didn't play... I barely played these Mongoose editions. I can't talk too much about them. This is the one I've played in amount of time, maybe third, fourth. I'd say RuneQuest 3 is first, RuneQuest 2 is second, and third place in time played is split between RuneQuest 6 and the new 7th edition. I suppose the Chaosium people who've taken it back home would want to call it the 4th edition, because it's their 4th edition. But anyway, they simply called it RuneQuest Glorantha, or just RuneQuest. Now, I do have the main core rulebook for this, as well as a lot of supplements, and I've used them. I have been, for once, not a GM, but actually a player in a relatively lengthy campaign where we used these new rules. So I have some experience with them. This is not simply a review based on reading. It's based on play. But it's a little tricky, because I have played with much more material than is in the set that I'm going to review now. So I'm going to try not to let that knowledge color my perception of this set too much, because I have to judge it as a starter set. I have to try to figure out what would somebody who only has this set get out of it. So let's go on to look at the contents of that. Okay, so let's move on to the actual unboxing. Now, on the back you have a brief description of what's included. When you open up the box, and this is not an initial unboxing, I've done this before, there is a sheet explaining again what's in the box, and it's pretty good that there's a box here that's a box of text that says what's not in the box. So it tells you there are no character generation rules, for example. My only nitpick is that this could have been good to actually have here on the back as well. That would be good customer information. But you can sort of, starter sets usually don't have character generation, so that it's kind of a normal thing. There is a set of dice that you would need to play. There is a staple-bound little booklet of rules. There is a second booklet of the world of Glorantha. The third one is called Solo Quest. And the fourth one is called Adventures. And this is the meatiest one, actually. Then we have a set of pre-generated characters that all come in these very nice folders with a picture of the character here. You fold them out. You have some information, you have some stats, you have even more stats on this other side. And there is a good number of pre-generated characters, actually. I should have counted them before I started this, but, you know, anyway. And there's a few blank ones. There's more than you will need. And then we have some maps of the Dragon Pass area and of one of the encounter areas. We have some reference sheets, and yeah, just a bunch of reference sheets. An interesting little thing called the Strike Rank Tracker, which is in a bit of, isn't it just paper, it's cardboard, and we'll talk about what strike ranks are later. Now, this is quite a lot of stuff. This can actually keep you playing for a long time. There's several adventures here, and there's like multiple sessions of stuff, and there's very useful background information as well. So, I don't have the numbers for what this will cost you, and it'll cost you different amounts in different regions and so forth. But what I can say is that this is definitely very good value for money, like all Chaosium starter sets are. You get a lot of stuff for your bucks. And well, now on to the actual review, where I will look at each of these 4 books separately and talk a little bit about them in detail. Starting with the rules booklet, this is 62 pages, and as you can see from the contents, it covers all the basics up into and including between adventures. That is how you improve your skills, etc. in downtime between adventures. So you can't make your own characters with this box set, but you can take the existing characters and improve them through play. So that's something. Now, most of this is concerned with explaining how the basic skill system works, which is a D100, what's called the basic role-playing system. You have a skill which is rated from well, up to 100 or more in some cases, and you roll percentile dice, and you roll equal to or under your skill to succeed. And then certain multiples, or rather fractions of that, will give extra results. For example, if you roll a 20% of your skill, that is a fifth of your skill, it's called a special success. And if you roll a 20th of your skill, that is 5% of your, whatever your percentile is, it's called a critical. And you can also fumble. So there's examples placed. There is a table here to, if you're not good at math in your head, you can get the critical and special and fumble ranges from it. And there's something called the resistance table, which is when you you do something that is against a passive resistance, and instead of two active forces against each other, if there's two active forces against each other, they roll their skills as an opposed roll against each other. And there's a lot of extra rules for combat. There is magic, which is in this set, you have the two basic kinds of magic, the two original kinds of magic from RuneQuest, which are spirit magic and rune magic. Spirit magic was originally called battle magic. So there's simple magic that everybody can use, essentially. And then there is very powerful magic that you have to worship gods to get. And you have to be a member of a cult. And they are connected to different runes. This is part of the mythology of Glorantha, the world of RuneQuest. And the reason it's called RuneQuest is that you quest to gain more connection to the deities and the runes they represent, because that will give you more magical power. And there is some slight mention of sorcery, I think because there might be some NPCs in the adventures that use sorcery. Some special rules. What you do between adventures. And then we're done. Now, what's my opinion of these rules? Well, it's kind of mixed, to be honest. Now, the rules as presented here are perfectly intelligible. They are kind of on the crunchy side. They are very traditional. It's a very traditional rules-heavy game by modern standards. It is hard for me to assess how easy it is. I have heard that some beginners have managed to pick this up and understand it perfectly well. I mean, it's not that it's hard to understand, it's not poorly explained, it's just that there's a lot of it, and it's very crunchy. And the noticeable thing is, when they designed this edition, they went back to their own previous editions, second and third edition, published by made by the Chaosium. And they started from that basis, and they added a few developments into it. They smoothed some things out. They improved the rune magic system, in my opinion, quite a bit. They added a passion system, which is lifted from Pendragon, which is sort of integrated here. That's one of my quibbles. It could have been better integrated, but you know, it's a good attempt. But they have ignored all outside influences. Everything. I mean, the D100 design space, the BRP basic outline of the BRP system, has been used by a lot of other companies and a lot of other designers, and there have been innovations in it in a lot of other places. But the Chaosium team behind this game seems to have a not invented here theory of design, where if somebody else came up with it, they're not going to use it. So they ignore the Mongoose editions, they ignore everything else that's used any kind of D100 system, and they just want to focus on their own ideas, and they want to keep it as close to the original game as possible. And you might think that I would like this because I have been with this game since the early 80s. I think 80 or 81 is when I bought my second edition box. But honestly, no. you know, the thing is, I don't have a nostalgic bone in my body. I don't care about trying to replicate the experiences of my youth anymore. You know, I realize the folly of that. You can't go back. And my tastes have shifted. I would have preferred if they had cleaned up the rules more, if they had adopted more ideas from the outside, and made a slightly less crunchy version of the game. That would have been perfect for me. Of course, I'm not... I can only state my opinion. Your opinion may very well differ from mine, if so, but I want to point out that this is a crunchy game, this is an old school game, this is a rules heavy game. And yeah, I don't think I want to say any more about the rules. They are functional but they require a lot of brain space. And one of the things that might require most brain space to understand is the initiative system. It's called the strike rank system. There is one piece of text. Most of this text is pretty much the same as in the normal core rule book. But they try to go the extra mile here to explain strike ranks with a special little box text saying understand strike ranks. And they point out that strike ranks can sometimes feel challenging to understand. And yes, they are. This is one of the things that us veterans of RuneQuest have been saying from the start. Strike ranks are a bit tricky. How do they function? Well, and this is my major criticism of this whole book is this little line of text here. It says here, they are not an action point allowance, but are often mistaken for such a system. I'm going to be generous here and try to say that whoever wrote this was just trying to simplify for the sake of the reader. Because if not, they either don't understand their own system or they're trying to gaslight me. Because the whole basic issue of the strike rank system is that it is two things in one. It is trying to accomplish two things. It is on the one hand, what they say it is here, namely it's simply an abstract way to measure speed between two combatants. But it is also pushed into service as an objective measure of time. Like strike ranks are made the equivalent of, you know, if something takes longer to do, it takes more strike ranks to do. So while it's not technically an action point system, it's sort of an action point system because it does measure, you know, how much you can do in a round. And rather than try to improve the system, they have chosen here to simply obfuscate the problem. And that sort of irritates me. That is the one thing that really annoys me about this book. Otherwise, it is perfectly fine. It is not my preferred kind of rules right now, but it might be yours. Who knows? Let's move on to the next book. Book 2 is entitled The World of Glorantha, which is a sort of deceptive title because it is 62 pages long, and only the first 20 or so are about the world as a whole. The last 40 pages are about one city in Sartor, namely Johnstown. So, yeah. Now, these first 20 pages go into the world as a whole, the Dragon Pass and Sartor, which are the region used for this box set in particular, and I think it does a reasonably good job of explaining things. Again, because I am not a beginner at this, it's hard for me to sort of see how a beginner would see it. It's hard for me to know what a beginner would want in the way of information. But it looks to me like it's probably functional. And the main thing is this city description. And by the way, starting here, we see that it's very well illustrated. That's just production values are high. I don't think I need to say that. The city of Johnstown has never been described in this level of detail before in any previous RuneQuest supplement. So where these first 20 pages are kind of mostly based on previous publications, the rest of this, the Johnstown part, is completely new. And I really like it. It is a very good setting. It describes, I think, everything you want to know about the movers and shakers and about the general layout of the city, which is in two parts. There's an upper city and there's a lower city. And the various quarters of it, and it's connected to some of the scenarios which are in a later book. So that's good. And I think it's a good idea to give you this sort of starting point. Because if you're going to start a campaign in Sartor, there's two ways you can go. Either you can center it on a clan, so then you would want to describe a smaller village and you know, people on a lower level, or you go to a big city and make it city focused. And I think the city focused is more what people would recognize from other role-playing games and other typical fantasy role-playing games. That's how you would start out. You would be like adventurers and you come to the big city to get jobs. And yeah, I don't think there's much more needs to be said about this book. I think it does its job very well for what it wants to do. Let's go to the next one. Book 3 is called Solo Quest. It is also 62 pages. No, it's slightly smaller. It's 58 pages. And it is a choose your own adventure path kind of book. This is something they did back in the RuneQuest 2 days. They published several books of solo scenarios, and they were called Solo Quest and Solo Quest 2 and so forth, I believe. So the Chaosium have some experience with this. In this particular case, the character is chosen for you. You get to dunk it, and it's designed to teach you the rules of the game while also presenting an important event, a specific battle, the Battle of Dangerford, from the history of the world. So it situates you, it gets you to meet some important NPCs, and it goes through all the things you need to do. And I've played through this, and it is perfectly fine. I enjoyed it, and it, like most solo adventures, uses teaching tools. The best way to do it is not to play it honestly, but to actually to flip back and forth. And if one course of action fails, don't start over. Just go back a few paragraphs and choose a different path and see what happens there. And in fact, once you've played through it once, you should actually read through all of it to find all the different paths, to find all the different options you might have taken and what could have happened. That just you get all the information out of it. And but as a whole, I think this does its job very well. It is a lot of, I mean, it's a fourth of the page count almost in this entire set, devoted simply to one solo adventure. That might seem like a lot, but I think it's motivated by the fact that it teaches you a lot as well. So I will give a very positive rating to this booklet as well. Finally, we have the fourth book, which in some ways is kind of the meat of the set. Now, I have to admit, I said that I'm basing this review on having played the game. I have not played these adventures. They were not included. The GM of the campaign I was in did not run these particular adventures. So here I'm just going to have to rely on my long knowledge of reading and running pre-published adventures to see how useful these are. So what is included is, and spoiler alert, of course, three complete adventures, and then some adventure seeds. And the idea is that two of these at least take place in and around Johnstown. So the first one, A Rough Landing, is a mission to go out from Johnstown to a village nearby where something strange is going on. Classic setup. The second one is weird goings on in the city itself, and the third one is a bit pretty far away from there. Now, on reading through these, my judgment is that they're all eminently playable. The first one is kind of a mix of event-based and location-based. So it starts out with the adventurers arriving in the city, and there's some events they run into, and then they get a mission, and they go to a location. Now, I did find the way Murner's Landing, the village, is described was kind of rough. It was hard to get a grasp on what was actually going on. I did not feel they presented the information in a good order. However, if you read the whole thing through, maybe a couple of times, it will start to make sense, and it'll clarify. Even though they have a box saying what's going on, it's not exactly the details of what you would find were difficult. But I think, yeah, with a little work you can figure it out. So it's a perfectly good adventure. The Fire and Darkness, the city-based adventure, is an event-based, a timeline-based adventure where things are going to happen unless the adventurers intercede. And it's partly, to a large extent, an investigation scenario. And a perfectly good one. And though it will end in a small dungeon crawl and a monster bash. And there are some optional things that can happen that don't need to happen, which is kind of a version of scenario writing that I like. So you don't railroad it into a specific finale. There are some likely finales, but it doesn't have to happen that way. So that's good. The third scenario, okay, so here's where I pull out my Grognard card. The Rainbow Mounds is a revision of one of the very first scenarios ever published for RuneQuest for 2nd edition in the Apple Lane scenario pack. So it takes place near a village called Apple Lane, which is not super near Johnstown, but whatever. And the idea here is that it is the same location, and some adventurers did go into it previously, and now they did a few things, and now there is a new status quo. However, so it's a little, the timeline is a little vague, but the original scenario has to have taken place at least 10 years before this one. Partly because there's an NPC who was a child back then and who is now supposed to be an adult. So, you know, maybe he was 10 then and he's 20 now, if you can call 20 an adult. In a world like Lorantha, 20 is an adult. But I personally find the new status quo not believable, given that this is a place that some adventurers went into 10 years ago. The things they say happened in here, I don't believe they would happen. However, so I run into the problem of my having too much knowledge. But if I try to see this with fresh eyes, if you regard this as just a scenario. If you ignore the idea that there's been adventuring activity there before, you don't know anything about what the initial state of this dungeon or cave complex actually was, then you can just let it ride. It's not important. This is just the grognard reflex saying, but that wouldn't happen. That's not what my character would do. But yeah, as written and presented and run without any previous knowledge of the Rainbow Mounds or Apple Lane, I believe this will work perfectly fine. It's a good example of what a dungeon would be like in RuneQuest. None of the previous adventures are dungeons. One is, just maybe a basement in a barn or in basement of a temple. Just a few slight underground locations within a village or a city. This is a complete cavern complex, like I showed you this whole map. So this is what dungeon crawling would be like in RuneQuest, and it's a good way to introduce that. As for the various adventure seeds, they are, they're like adventure seeds in any product. What you get out of them is what you put into them. And it ends with a mini calendar of the seasons in Glorantha. And also some advertising for additional publications. So overall, I would say the adventure booklet, and by the way, this is slightly larger than the others. This is 82 pages. The adventure booklet is fit for purpose. It does what it's supposed to do. It has 3 different kinds of adventures. They're all of an introductory level. They're suited for introductory characters, new characters, and any GM worth their salt could easily turn each of these into several sessions of play. So there's a lot of play value in this. So we come to the conclusion. And now I don't give grades or ratings. I will just try to give you a short summary of what I think about this starter set and who it's useful for, who would find good use out of it. And my conclusion is, one of the first things I stated, it's extremely good value for money. It's packed full of interesting stuff. If you're interested in Glorantha, even if you have the complete rule set and everything else published for this game system, this box is still useful because of the adventures included and the background information on Johnstown. And also incidentally, the description of the Battle of Dangerford, which is an interesting historical tidbit. So it's still good, even if you own the complete rules. Now, who is interested in RuneQuest to begin with? Well, to be interested in RuneQuest, you have to be interested in the world of Glorantha. And if you are interested in the world of Glorantha, well, this is the currently published version of the game for that setting. You're gonna have to get this. That's it. There's no choice. I would not suggest. I would not recommend this based on the rules themselves. The rules honestly seem like an afterthought, even by the designers. I would personally, if I ever GM a campaign of this, I'm gonna house rule the heck out of it. Now that I've seen it in play as a player. But there is a functional skeleton there. There's a functional basis for a rule set. You just need to tweak a little to suit your own tastes. And yeah, so I realize that throughout this review, I have not said very much about the world of Glorantha, which I just said was the big selling point of this. But because that's like a whole nother video, that's a whole nother series of videos trying to explain Glorantha. So I'm gonna have to ask you to look that up elsewhere if you want to get more information about what the world is like, to see if you can get, if it's something you'd be interested in. All I want to say with this review is, if you are interested in the world of Glorantha, this starter set is a very good starting point. Even though, as I've said multiple times, I have my doubts about the actual rules themselves, but that is a matter of taste and opinion. So, make of that what you will. And thank you for watching this video. Please keep watching my channel for new reviews. I have my Monday Miniatures Rambles every Monday about my miniature painting. And I do these occasional other videos as well. But if you're subscribed, they should show up in your sub feed in any case. So please subscribe as well. And thank you for watching, and goodbye for this time.